What is up, SBT fans? Welcome back to another Power Rankings video. We're joined by myself, Mams, and Tyler.
What's up, guys?
And we're back again, guys. You know, another week of Power Rankings. We're into week 4 now, which means we're getting close to the point where you're going to have to start prepping for playoffs. It's only 10 weeks, and at this point, not too many changes has occurred. Throughout the Power Rankings, they might solidify as we go on, but we're going to be talking about the same thing we normally do throughout these Power Rankings. We're going to go from D Division and then work our way up to A, and we're going to start our D Division at the bottom.
So, just so you guys know, in no way, shape, or form are me and Mams experts at this game, and we do those PRs solely for fun, as people seem to be enjoying them. So, again, please don't be offended by any of the Power Rankings, and try not to think about them too much in battles. It's literally just for fun. Think of it as your own season, and we're just commenting on it. Like, again, we are not experts at this game, and we are just saying things as we see them from our point of view. So even if it's right or wrong, there is literally no right answer, and you know how you play, and we just play according to our own styles. So again, please do not be offended by any of the Power Rankings.
I agree with Tyler wholeheartedly. We are only trying out Power Rankings, weekly Power Rankings through this season, and like Tyler said, we're not experts, and we literally just try to figure out who performed better than who did, and we call it out as it is. But we're not experts, and we don't expect anyone to really take what we say seriously, so please don't. So whenever Tyler can, you can start for D Division. We can jump right into it.
Right, so first up at the bottom in D League is going to be Daniel and my horse for the second straight week. And unfortunately, Daniel got 6-0'd by Wolf this week, as from what I remember, Mega Venusaur was a huge threat, and Daniel let his answers to Mega Venusaur fall too early in the match for him to actually break it in the end, and Venusaur just cleaned up with 3 or 4 kills.
Yeah, I can only recall that match as well. Wolf did a great job. Getting a 6-0 is just a testament to how much better he's gotten. But Daniel, he has to stay at 16 after being 16 from last week. Hopefully he gets some kind of momentum soon, because again, this is a week 4 going into mid-season at this point, and we're gonna start needing to see all the coaches start getting on their A game. But at number 15, above Daniel, we have Harbor and his Snow Points, No Runts, who lost this week against Python. As I recall, it was a back and forth match, but really there was points during the match that I want to recall that Harbor could have capitalized on with Python's plays, because he literally sacked off his Celesteela instead of perhaps predicting the play that Python went for, and then just going into something like his Garchomp, which he could have actually capitalized on that and maybe brought the score down a little bit closer, even though it was already at 2-0.
The biggest flaw I myself can find in Harbor's game is literally the fact that he's not bringing his best offensive mon. He didn't bring his best offensive mon for 3 of the 4 weeks in Mega Gyarados. Mega Gyarados is such a huge threat since the buff in Gen 8, and it is literally so hard to deal with. The one time he actually brought it, he got a 6-0 with it.
He got
like Mega Gyarados literally swept every single mon on the other side, and he only brought it 1 week out of 4.
Yeah, exactly. We can move up.
Next up at number 14, we've got Nico and the Spartan Samurats. And Nico faced off against Bullis this week, but unfortunately could not pull out the win. So he had to go down 2 spots from number 12 to number 14 in this week's PRs.
Alright, moving up to number 13, we have Python, and we just spoke on him. He moves up 2 spots from beating Harbor in last week. So Yeah, Python I think did a good job at pressuring Harbor, and he was able to get into positions where he could just spam certain moves, and he kind of just reserved his win cons in the late game to make sure that he didn't lose. It did
Yeah,
come down
when
close.
you're in a position to spam flare blitz with the arm, you're always in a good position.
Yeah, exactly. Even though, like I said, Garchomp was pretty free. Obviously, like it still would have taken a lot of damage from Darmanitan, but I still think perhaps like not taking that much damage on Cell Stealer could have actually helped you in the late game, but you still needed to find a way to beat that Darmanitan anyways. So maybe Cell Stealer wasn't the best to reserve in the back, but
Up at number 12, we've got Bolus and the Boston Blissies. So Bolus with a win this week goes up one spot to number 12 in our power rankings. And like we just said, Bolus played Nico this week, pulling out the win. And yeah, he deserved to go up one spot this week.
yeah, Nico was already at number 12 last week, so Bolus just beating him, being at 13. They almost just swapped spots, but Bolus at number 12. And above Bolus at number 11, we have Sai and his Texas Toxicities, who actually lost his match this week against Paco. And he lost a big 6-0 match against Paco. Paco doing an amazing job. Sai honestly could not keep up with Paco's plays. I really think that a lot of times he was just read, like he was just outplayed. Paco was reading everything that Sai was doing. There was no room for Sai to just come in and start applying his own sort of pressure. Unfortunately for him, I think the matchup might not have been in his favor, but even still, Paco really was pressuring Sai throughout the entirety of that match. So he has to drop down just to the 11th spot for now.
Next up at number 10, we've got John and Dubai Terpions. And John had to face Ganon this week, and unfortunately could not pull out a win. And he had to go down 2 spots this week due to that loss. And Ganon never really looked back in that match. He took control from the beginning, and he just pretty much sailed through. John tried to make a few predictions and bring it back, but Ganon was too far ahead for it to be a close match.
Yeah, and Ganon was at number 11 last week, so obviously with John being at number 8, John had to drop a few spots there as well, just to even out the playing field. And number 10 suits him for right now. I know John's a good player, and hopefully he bounces back. But at number 9, we have Zach and his Chicago Cobra Knights, who did have to drop quite a bit since last week, since he played against Cammy. And Cammy pretty much, he knew exactly what he was doing. Like, I don't want to speak too much on Cammy just yet, but Zach could not find an in that match just due to a certain Seismitoad set that Zach really just didn't have anything for that Seismitoad. Like, yes, he had Hidden Power Grass on Manectric, but when the Seismitoad is behind a sub and you have to take an Earth Power first before hitting a Hidden Power Grass, you're not really in the driver's seat, because obviously his opponent can preserve that Seismitoad and come back in later and then set up on that Vaporeon, which didn't have Roar. I don't think Zach's prep was up to par this week, unfortunately. I know he's a good coach, but had he had things like Roar maybe on Vaporeon, he wouldn't have gotten balled by that Seismitoad. And then his offensive threats, unfortunately, just couldn't break the entirety of the rest of Cammy's team. So Zach staying at number 9 for right now. I know he'll bounce back.
Next up at number 8, we've got Wolf and the Brampton Ursaring. And Wolf, like we just said earlier, had a very convincing 6-0 against Daniel this week, which earned him 2 more spots in the power rankings this week, all the way up to number 8. And like I said earlier, Daniel really didn't have anything for that Mega Venusaur, which Wolf preserved very well and brought it in at the end when he saw that Daniel had no more answers, and Mega Venusaur just picked up the last kills to secure that 6-0.
Yep. So moving up to our number 7, we have Gannon and his Scrambling Crowbats, who jumped up 4 spots from last week after he beat his opponent John this week. And that was a 5-0. Gannon actually did a really good job. He pressured John to the point where he could have just continuously just gained momentum and beat down the rest of his team. I believe the match was actually played a little bit later on, so I'm not sure if John exactly had the best prep going into it, but either way, Gannon pulled out the win in a very successful 5-0, so he deserves to move up to number 7.
Next up at number 6, we've got George and the Tectonic Typhlosions, and George, who faced Steph this week. I know that it was very unfortunate about that Leaf Storm miss with Cert, but after that happened, he literally had no way at all to beat that Milotic, and Milotic literally just walled out the rest of George's team until the end of that match. It literally just dragged Steph to a W, and there was not much George can do once that Serp went down, because it was literally his only Milotic answer, and he couldn't set up on it with the Dragon Tail, which was very nice prep on Steph's part, but yeah, George had to go down 2 spots due to that loss this week.
Yeah, what I've noticed from George, and it's a fall from grace. Obviously, George was our number 1 throughout the beginning of this season, up until about week 2. But George, I noticed that some of his mons, it's hard for his team to sometimes break very bulky mons, especially things like Melodic, which can phase you. Without being able to set up, it kind of hurts his standing a little bit, because then he's kind of always put into the passive defensive role, and you can never find his footing after that. But George, I know he's a good coach. He'll bounce back for sure. This is getting close to playoff contention time, so if he can stick around the number 6 spot, maybe work his way into the number 5 or number 4 spot, he'll have a good chance of making playoffs. But sitting above George, George we had at number 1, we have another coach who was sitting at number 1 last week, and that's going to be Rozzy in his 2 Spoons 1 Zam, who actually lost his match this week in the most aggravating 167 turn match I've watched in a while, versus Tyler B. And that match, honestly ridiculous. Probably, but to be fair,
I hated that match so much. Like, there was no offense brought whatsoever on either side of the field. They literally had one offensive mon each in Circuitry and Mega Galate on the other side. And it was literally so painful to watch. Like, no damage input whatsoever. I mean, Regen literally got more
Tyler
HP back than damage was dealt in every turn, and it was just ridiculous.
To be fair, Tyler B also did bring a Crocodile, which never really saw the field until like later on in the match, I think. But yeah, you're right. There was no offense brought. Like, it was basically Blissey coming in a lot of the time, healing up and then teleporting out, trying to get momentum into the Mega Galate so that he can start pressuring Tyler's team a little bit. But because Rozzy didn't bring like Swords Dance or anything, or even like Sub would have been nice on Rozzy's side, because he could never predict the Tornadus properly to come in, and then he would always go for close combat, and then having to resort to swap out, and then having to trying to get his footing back again. And at that point, because of the fact that Tyler's team was so bulky, he would always be on the back end, because there was no regenerating for Rozzy. And like, to be fair, when you see a team as fat as Tyler B's team, you have to just make sure to bring strong wall breakers, things that can actually just break them down, because they're going to be swapping around. But if you can just break them down, even if they're swapping, then you might have a chance to actually just beat them down, and then come in later on with your win con and then win from there. But because it was such a defensive team on both sides, it went on for years and years. And Rozzy just could not find his in that match because of the fact that Tyler B brought Regenerator. So he does have to move down, unfortunately, about 4 spots from number 1, and sitting at number 5. But we know how good Rozzy is, and he'll come back for sure. Just learn from this match, of course.
Next up at number 4, we've got Paco and the Charleston Gastrodons, who went up quite a few spots, if I remember correctly. Yeah, he went up 3 spots this week due to another 6-0 against Sai, and I just feel like it needs to be mentioned that Paco now has a 2-week streak with 6-0s, so it's his second 6-0 in a row, which warrants a mention. And I don't know, maybe if he gets a third one in a row, he can finally break the top 3 and get to number 1, because he's been playing really well lately. So
I agree. I think that Paco really deserves, like you said, the mentions. Last season he got pretty close to playoffs, if I remember correctly, and this season I think he wants to showcase off why he deserves to move up to in the ranks. In the beginning of the season, I think he was still trying to find, like, his kind of niche with his team that he was using, because he was sitting at the bottom for a lot of the time, and then he started jumping up. Like last week he got a 6-0, this week he got a 6-0. If Paco keeps up this momentum, maybe he's just his prep now. Like maybe he's building with some good people, or he just has a good mentality with his team now. But he knows exactly what he's doing. I could tell during the match, like, he preserved everything properly. He had switch-ins for everything. Yeah, he played against Sai. Yeah, so yeah, it was a really good showing on his part there. But moving up to number 3 now, we have Steph and his Ontario Lucarios, who finally broke into the top 3. Steph has been moving up in the ranks through most of the season. He started off with a win in the beginning of the season, and then faced off against coaches like Python and George, and beating out George, who was sitting at number 1 at the beginning of the season. He definitely deserves to move up in the ranks there. Steph, like you said, he preserved the melodic, which unfortunately for George, dodged a leaf storm, and then from there he just couldn't, there was no way for George to come back in that match. So Steph, sitting at number 3 is very good for right now.
Next up at number 2, we've got Cammy and the Loch Ness Lombres. And Cammy played Zach this week, and like you said earlier, that Seismitoad was just too much for Zach to handle, as Seismitoad picked up something ridiculous, like 4 kills, and it wasn't even that much of an offensive set, but Zach literally just had under prep for that Seismitoad a lot, and Seismitoad is a force to be reckoned with, apparently. So
that
subset was pretty nice on Cammy's part, to be fair, since it literally put in all the work it needed to, and Zach literally had no answers for it. So props on Cammy's part for finding that weakness in prep.
Cammy, yeah, for sure. Cammy, I don't even think he showcased off the rest of his team, but if that Seismitoad wasn't the only good set he brought, like if the rest of his team was that great, then Cammy definitely deserves to be sitting at number 2 here. He didn't move from last week. He was also at number 2 there, but we couldn't exactly move him up to number 1 just because of other matches played. But Cammy definitely a force to be reckoned with for this season in D. I don't think Cammy has ever dropped beneath the top 5. Actually, in the beginning of the post draft, we did rank his team pretty low, but now we're realizing our mistake. He's definitely a top contender in D division, and who knows? Maybe next week he might climb up to that number 1 spot. But for right now, number 2 looks nice. And sitting up at number 1, finally, we got Tyler B and his Villanova Toro Cats, who dethroned Rozzy from last week, and we just talked about that match. We understand exactly what the issue is going into that match, and not that Tyler played phenomenally. They both played a really good match. I think that was probably the match of the week, as aggravating as it was. But to be fair, Tyler B could have also brought some offense that could have helped him in that match. Yes, his defense was enough to make sure that he preserved the 5-0. It was a 5-0, I believe. Yeah, it was a 5-0. But had he brought like more offensive threats, I don't think it would have gone to an 168-7 turn match, which I don't think is healthy for anyone. Like your mentality at that point starts to drop, thinking like, okay, I just want this match to end, or I just want to make sure that I like win at least, because once you hit the 100 turn standpoint in a match, it's almost like you're kind of melting at that point. But Tyler, he was able to continue on. He made sure that he preserved everything he needed to. Once Tangrowth got too low, he made sure to swap it out, swap it back in, regenerate it up a little bit, make sure that Rozzy couldn't break it. And that's exactly it. Like his team, the nature of his team is just regenerate, and then bring in your offensive threats and try to get a kill there. So Tyler, number one. Yeah, hopefully he can preserve that spot, but he's doing well so far in D, and I'd like to see some more from him.
So that's it for D League, guys. On to C League now. At number 16, we've got Griffin and the Rhyme City Ride-Ons this week, and Griffin lost to Nathan in a 4-0, so claiming that number 16 spot this week. And Griffin unfortunately didn't really have anything for Nathan's build, because that major offense got walled by Nathan's team.
Yeah.
And not much you can do when that happens.
So one of the reasons we also had Griffin at 16, and not that Griffin's a bad coach or anything, but I could tell that Griffin basically brought the same team that he brought the previous week, and he led with the same Pokemon from the previous week. He led with the Weavile. Now I'm not sure if the builds were exactly the same, but he literally brought the same 6 Mons, and he led with the same Pokemon. His prep now is becoming kind of obvious, and it's almost like, alright, at this point he needs to make sure that he knows what he's weak to. He needs to make sure that his opponent is not reading him properly, and he needs to make sure that he's not predictable for when he's going into the match. But one of the other reasons is that number 16 is because the coaches above him kind of played out their games a lot better. But I would like to see a lot more hustle from Griffin for these next couple of weeks, especially going into playoffs. But above Griff, we have Goomba and his Detroit Dittos, who didn't move at all, really. He played against Major, and once again, Goomba, he's been at the number 15 spot for the past 2 weeks now, and he at least really tried to break through Major's score, but Major really just had a handle on that entire game, and Goomba unfortunately just he couldn't find his footing in that match. So sitting at number 15 again. Hopefully he can nab a win at some point throughout the season. But for right now, we have to kind of place him at number 15.
Next up at number 14, we've got Piran and the St. Louis Sizzlers. Piran faced off against Wavali this week, and Wavali is a tough opponent, being at the top of the table since the start of the season. And that's pretty much it. He lost 2-0, but he still managed to bring it down to a 2-0, which is pretty good. But unfortunately, still had to drop that one spot, because a loss is still a loss. And I'm sure he'll bring it back in the following weeks.
Yeah, Piran, a good coach for sure. I think he's just more offensive with his plays, and then just ends up breaking a few of his opponent's team, but then doesn't really have much of a late game to work with. So Piran at 14. Above him, we have Sacred TD and his Los Angeles Dodrio, who moved down 2 spots since last week, and he played against Quality Content this week, and he got 6-0'd. And when you get 6-0'd, that's you kind of have to step back a bit and see exactly what you're doing wrong, why your team isn't functioning the way it should be, and what plays you could have made better throughout the match. I think I don't know exactly the caliber of Sacred's playstyle just yet, because he only just recently entered the season, like 2 weeks ago, So I think he's still trying to get his own kind of play style properly set, or just trying to find his niche. But getting 6-0 again, just he has to just make sure to understand where he went wrong, and from there he can just kind of come back and perhaps climb and try to make playoffs. Again, there's only 6 more weeks left, guys, and you have to start making sure that you can grab the respective wins to make it into the top part of the division. So Sacred, I'd like to see some more hustle from him as well.
Yeah, unfortunately, like you said, for Sacred, he's only been in the league for a couple of weeks now. He didn't get to draft his own team, unfortunately, and like he said in the coach chat, the team isn't really up to his game style because he doesn't really have any breakers in that build. And as unfortunate as it is, you still have to try to make whatever you have work, and it's just not enough to justify not bringing him down due to a loss in the standings this week.
Yeah, exactly.
So next up at number 12, we've got Ryan and the London Lucarios. Ryan, who faced off against Gryon this week, unfortunately got 4-0'd, and due to that loss, had to go down 2 spots in this week's power rankings. And Gryon has been playing pretty well lately, firing on all cylinders. And it's very hard to stop a coach on a roll. And Ryan was Gryon's latest victim this week.
Yeah, Ryan just came up a bit short this week, but I know he has a good team, a very good team. I mean, when we ranked it after the draft, it was number 2. So, he just has to kind of just, get a handle on why his team is just not working for him. If he has to make some moves, then, by all means, there's nothing wrong with changing up your team at this point in the season. But yeah, Ryan at number 12. We're going to move up to our number 11, who we have at Salopgo and his Copenhagen Canines, who dropped 3 spots this week after last week where he got his 6-0 against Griffin. But, no, sorry, that was a 5-0. But this week he actually got 5-0'd by Aaron. And, when you go from winning a 5-0 to losing 5-0, it becomes very inconsistent. It kind of makes it hard for us to place him properly in the power rankings. But because he lost to Aaron, who was already at number 12 last week, he did have to drop a few spots there. And Aaron played a really good game, if I recall correctly. So Salabio sitting at number 11 right now kind of makes the most sense.
Next up at number 10, we've got the other part of that match in Aaron and the Los Santos Septiles. And Aaron just played very well that match, and Celebro was on the back foot pretty much all along. And that win grants Aaron 2 spots in this week's rankings. Yep.
Aaron, again, another coach that makes it hard for us to place because Aaron seems to bounce around a lot as well. Inconsistencies aside, I know other coaches have their own priorities, or maybe other leagues they need to work in. But Aaron at number 10 for right now, not enough of a showing to move him up all the way to the top. If Aaron wants to make playoffs this season, he definitely needs to get some more wins. But at number 10, it's going to be hard for him to make playoffs if he's not consistently getting those wins. So above Aaron, we have Ghost and his Brisbane Zero Aura FC, who dropped 4 spots this week. Ghost has been sitting at the top of the division for most of the season, for the first couple weeks. But now at this point, Ghost he got outplayed and lost 5-0 to Swampy, who was sitting at number 9 last week. And I'm not sure if it's just Ghost kind of losing momentum. He had a great beginning of the season, but losing 5-0 against Swampy, I think he needs to reevaluate where he's going wrong and start thinking about how he can make playoffs at this point. He's still a good coach. He's just been on a kind of a losing streak, losing to Quality and then Swampy this week. but I'm sure he can climb his way back up. I know that he has a good team and he's a good coach, so I'd like to see more from him.
Next up at number 8, we've got Ballistic and the Oregon Golducks, or this week we could call him the Giant Slayer, as he took down the number 1 spot in the RIN. And yeah, that was, to say the least, he actually got a 5-0 against the number 1 spot after being number 16 last week. So when you get a pretty convincing win against the top of the leaderboard, when you're at the bottom, obviously you have to go up, and those 8 spots justify just that. And a very good match by Ballistic this week, and we like to see more of that pretty much every week.
Yeah, Ballistic, he played a nice game. In the end game, Dragon Dance Mega Arrow was able to clean up the rest of Rin's team. I think he broke down the appropriate walls he needed so that Mega Arrow can just click buttons at that point after clicking on Dragon Dance. So he did a good job. Ballistic, I'm not sure where he was for the first couple of weeks. Like, I don't know why we were placing him at the bottom for most of the time. But now, after beating out Rin, like you said, he's the giant killer. He's climbing up, and let's see if he can continue it, because I know he did an impressive showing in his D division last season. So if he can continue it this season, perhaps he can make playoffs still. I know he's only got the 1 win, but there's still time to improve. Sitting above him was his opponent for this week. It was Rin in his Las Vegas Ludicolo. We do have him above Ballistic because, of course, Rin has still been shining throughout most of the season. He's been getting wins consistently, and he even made number 1 last week. So, him losing this week, of course, it's not the best, especially when he loses to the bottom of the power rankings. But I know that with a good mindset that Rin always has and carries, and a good team as well, he's definitely going to be climbing back up. So sitting at number 7 kind of suits him for right there. There's no placing him lower than that. I know that he's definitely a coach that can consistently get wins, but this week just wasn't really his week.
So next up at number 6, we've got Major Comeback in the All Asian All Momolas. Major, who faced Goomba, it was this week. Never really looked back that match. He had a pretty comfortable win against Goomba, played his walls like he needed to, pivoted like he needed to, and pretty much just did everything like he needed to clutch that win this week. And that warranted 1 spot promotion this week in the power rankings, all the way up to number 6.
Yeah, Major's team, like we said, he was rated number 1 at the beginning of the season, and he's just been trying to find a win throughout the last couple of weeks, and he's finally starting to do that. He won last week, he won this week. He's starting to climb back up into the ranks, so I hope we can continuously see more of that. But above him at number 5, we have Swampy and the Seattle Swampards, who won against Ghost this week. And Swampy, I know how good of a coach he is. He beat Aaron last week. He beat Ghost 5-0 this week. There's really no stopping Swampy. Swampy is one of those coaches where I at the beginning of the season I thought he's gonna make playoffs for sure. He's definitely a good coach, and he's played with some of the best already. So Swampy, he has a good team, and I know that he knows how to build. Sitting at number 5 right now, I'd like to see if he can beat out some of the higher ranked coaches. But number 5 kind of makes sense for him, and he's definitely going to be in playoff contention for the next couple of weeks. So that's Swampy.
He's one of the coaches who is very hard to stop once he gets in his groove, and he's been showing that lately as he picked up a few wins.
Yeah.
So next up at number 4, we've got Nathan and the Charlotte Chimchars, and this week Nathan faced off against Griffin, and Griffin, who is ranked at the bottom this week and was pretty low last week, but Nathan really played well. Like we said earlier, Griffin pretty much brought the same team, but it wasn't that bad since Nathan pretty much prepped for that, and he won that match pretty comfortably. Never really looked back. Did all he had to do to clutch that win pretty easily and earn himself 2 spots in this week's power rankings.
Yeah, Nathan, another one of those coaches that's probably gonna try to sit at playoff contention or fight for a playoff spot at some point. Very good coach, and you know, there's not too much left to say after that. But above him at number three, who are finally going to move up to our number three, Gryon, and his Peterborough Palpitoads, who move up one spot from last week. Gry, he's been sitting at number four for the past 2 weeks. But at this point, we could finally bring him up into our number three spot, simply due to, Rain going down a lot. But I think Gry with his Rain team, as much as I don't really like Rain, I do like the Zapdos. I do like the rest of his squad, and I think there was just one point in that match that I didn't exactly care for exactly. It was when Gry sacked off his Ferrothorn to a Heat Wave from I think it was Ryan's Tornadus. I can't remember exactly, but Rain wasn't up. Ferrothorn wasn't against Tornadus, and he kind of just sacked it. Maybe it was an over prediction on his part, but I don't think exactly he needed to sack it that way. Either way, he was able to get the win, and a very good showing on his part. So he has to move up just the one spot, and hopefully he can maintain that spot throughout the rest of the season.
Next up, at number 2, we've got Wavali and the Seattle Mariners. Wavali, one of the strongest coaches in C League, and he's been showing it up. He's been showing that since the start of the season, and another win again this week against Piran. So, that, I really don't know what to say about Mega Gallade other than the fact that it's going insane in C League.
It's just crazy.
Pretty much, it's just ridiculous what that mon is doing right now in C League. It's literally leaving blood everywhere behind it. It just, like what Valley said in the coach chat, mons are literally dying to be on the field with it. So you can't put it in a better way than that.
only 4 weeks in, and his Gallade is 17 kills and I think only 2 deaths. So, by the time this hits week 10, I don't know if he's going to get 100 kills with it, or he's planning on getting 50. I have no idea, but
might just be a new SBT record by the end of that season.
And that just also shows how good Mega Gallade is, and there's really no stopping Mega Gallade. There's not too many mons that wall it per se. You got your psychic types, but obviously this thing gets knocked off, and it's too good. And Wavali having it, especially with a good team, definitely gonna move up. He didn't move from last week, but that's only because our number one deserves the move up to number one. Wavali, I think he hasn't left the top 5 throughout the beginning of the season. So I definitely think Wavali is going to continue to stay at the top 3 or even the top 5 throughout the rest of the season. He's definitely a good coach. Moving up to our actual number 1, though, we have Quality Content, and the Cairo Cops move up 2 spots after his win this week, and it was a really convincing win against Sacred. He got a 6-0, and that definitely gives us the incentive to move him all the way up to that number 1. Quality, he beat out Ghost last week, and he's just been on a tear. I think there's really no stopping him. He has a really interesting prep throughout a lot of the weeks, and I think with his creativity, he's able to create sets that are very unpredictable, which is very good in a coach, a good quality to have. Him and his Quality Content. But at number 1, I think he deserves the spot. I think throughout the next couple of weeks, it feels interesting because there hasn't been one coach who's been number 1 for 2 weeks in a row. It started with Major, and now it's at Quality, and it's continuously going to keep going in that direction. But maybe Quality can hold the number 1 spot at least for another week, but who knows.
That is going to be it for C-Div, guys. On to B-League now. So starting off at number 16 this week for the third week in a row is going to be Rummy and the Lehigh Valley Phantoms. Rummy got 4-0'd by Raven this week. Once again, Raven's team absolutely disgusting. I hate Stall, and it's not even Stall. Like, it's more than Stall, and it's just absolutely disgusting. I hate even looking at it, and
Yeah.
I can't even imagine what coaches feel like having to face that and prep for that.
Yeah,
But
Rummy's team, I don't think he was exactly built to face Stall, because having a Mega Venusaur is good, but it doesn't break really fat teams. Like what's it really gonna do against like a Chansey or even like like even a Suicune sometimes if it gets Calm Minds up, but Rummy, he had some really good sets though. He had the Honchkrow, he had the Nasty Plot sub Honchkrow, which I think only had Dark Pulse, which didn't exactly make too much sense considering Raven has a Mega Altaria. It was a good set for real, but I think he kind of needed some more breakers in that match. Like when you see a fat team like Ravens, definitely gonna need some mons that can break down certain bulky mons like Corviknight, certain mons like Suicune, Hippowdon, and Rummy just didn't have it this week. He was able to kind of get into a good position, but then Raven brought in his Dragon Dancing Mega Altaria, and then it was just a wrap from there. So Rummy, unfortunately, with that loss again, kind of has to sit at the bottom, unfortunately. But moving up above Rummy, we got Crow at number 15 and his Virginia Victinis, who does move down one spot this week, only because of the fact that he got 6-0'd by Rizzo. And yeah, like he played a really good game, but Riz really outplayed him throughout most of the match. Like I don't think Crow could have found any kind of opening at all throughout the match. Like it was pretty tough, and Crow unfortunately not getting too many opportunities to bring in his offense, and then at number 15, he just hasn't been able to win most of his matches lately. We did start him off at the beginning saying like his team is amazing, but it probably just isn't the type of team that he excels with, and that could be the case. But Crow, he needs to sit at number 15 for right now, but he does need to reevaluate what his team is going to look like in the next coming weeks, because we are getting to the point where mid-season is going to be very important to determine who's going to playoffs. So Crow, I hope he can start thinking about how he's going to do that.
Next up at number 14, we've got Witchard and the Superior Snoms. And Witchard played Juke this week, and he did very well to bring it down to a 2-0. He's getting closer and closer every single week, so that's good for him. And yeah, he came to me about a few questions in Juke's team, and obviously Juke's team is pretty gross, not a lot of weaknesses. And he went up one spot even though he lost. But yeah, that game was actually pretty close, and if he keeps pushing, he's definitely gonna get that one.
Yeah, it was a really close match, and he only moves up to one spot, just due to Crow getting 6-0. But Witchard, like you said, he's getting closer, and it's already that time of the season. He definitely needs to get some wins at this point. But moving up above Witchard is Charles, who didn't play a match this week. He kind of just he just forfeited his match this week against Adam. I'm not going to say too much about that because I don't know exactly the circumstances, but he's sitting at number 13. He didn't move at all, and yeah, Charles, I think he's going to continue playing off the rest of the season, but I think he just needed to he had to forfeit this week for personal reasons, I believe.
Next up at number 12, we've got Leonard and Piazzel Falkmar. However you say that name, but we'll roll with it.
Alkmaar, yeah.
And Leonard played Pierre this week. Uh, didn't really have much for Pierre's ring team. The ring team pretty much just went bananas on that team, and sadly had to. He's still stuck where he was last week, but that loss couldn't bring him up this week.
Yeah. So he's just at the same spot because I know that match itself was kind of hacksy. And I don't exactly want to talk about too much of the hacks there because a lot of it mattered and then some of it didn't matter. But whether it mattered or not, like, Leonard, he could not just, get back into the match, unfortunately. And you never want to get hacked. Like, seeing hacks on your against you is the worst. And I know he faced some of that last week, with him and his Necrozma getting flinched, but. Or was it flinch? It was crit, sorry. But anyways, without talking too much about hacks, let's move up to Joel and his Kattegat Corver Knights at number 11. So Joel this week, he also got 6-0'd by Miles. Really tough to see because I know how good Joel is, and especially with his win against Charles last week, which was a 6-0 for him. Joel just could not break the combination of Gastrodon. He could not break the combination of Gastrodon and a couple of other walls that Miles had. And in the late game, Miles was just in a position to click Boom Burst with Toxtricity and just win. And unfortunately, like maybe if Joel brought Energy Ball and Reuniclus, it could have been something. But not bringing any kind of coverage for Gastrodon. It's really tough because then it comes to the point where you're sitting in front of a mon that's really fat and you just don't have coverage for it. So
even if it's not Energy Ball, the fact that he brought Thunderwave over Toxic with such a thick team,
Toxic would have helped as well.
If only he brought Toxic over T-Wave, that would have been a very different outcome.
Yeah,
but sadly, there was no way of touching that Gastrodon at all on Joel's side.
Yeah. So he did have to drop 3 spots from that, and I hope Joel can come back in this match. Again, he's not another one of those coaches that was a replacement, so he didn't get to draft his team, but he at this point has used his team, I think, just for the 1 week. He was a replacement in week 2, so he's been 2 weeks
3 weeks now.
3 weeks, yeah. Yeah. So Joel at number 11.
Up next at number 10, we've got Gene and the Ottawa Gengars. Gene, unfortunately, the axe took the better of him, but nevertheless, he still brought it back to a 1-0, which was very good, but not enough to justify not bringing him down. So Gene going down 1 spot due to that static Ampharos being so clutch.
It was very sad because G-Darm was finally going to do something, and then static, and that's just. I mean, if I understand why you bring Ice Punch over Icicle Crash if you're Belly Drum, but if he had Icicle Crash, he wouldn't have gotten static there. But then again, he might have missed. Who knows? But Hacks definitely got the better of him, like you said. So we did have to move him down just the 1 spot. Moving up to number 9, and we have Not Adam and his Arson Ammo Bombs. I'm gonna have to kind of not talk too much about Adam at this point either, because he did get the forfeit win against Charles, so he does move up the 1 spot, but that's only because his win with the forfeit, it doesn't really say much about how good of a match it would have been or not, but he only moves the 1 spot up because Gene had to move down 1 spot.
So we've got Juke Loans and the Malibu Morlals at number 8. And Juke facing off against Witchard this week. Juke had a pretty decent advantage throughout the match, and Witchard couldn't do much. And if I remember correctly, that Lele just came in at the end and made that match what it ended up being. So Juke going up 3 spots with that win this week, and he pivoted well that match, played very well, and Witcher didn't really have much for Juke's threats.
It came down close. It was really close. Witcher preserved the Mega Glade in the late game, but of course, Juke did the best he could to preserve Lele in the late game because it was scarfed. And once it came down to the late game, it was just Lele versus Gallade. Juke could just spam Moonblast and win from there. So he definitely has to move up a few spots in the rankings. But above him, now sitting at number 7, we have Aaron the Baron and his Cold Jester Cobalions, who, even though he won this week against Gene, he doesn't actually get to move up in the ranks. And just because of how close of a match it was, it came down really close. And if it wasn't for that static, who knows exactly what would have happened there. I think Gene actually would have swept, but like you can't say for sure exactly. But he did pull out the win, so Aaron definitely he knows what he's doing, and maybe we'll finally get to see him move up again. He was sitting pretty high up at the beginning of the season, but at this point we are seeing like the top 6, which we're going to get into, have really proven themselves as very, very good players. So Aaron, in order to break through into the top 6, he's going to have to start getting some really convincing wins.
Next up at number 6, we've got Ampha and the Minnesota Twin Eagles. Ampha finally dethroned after 4 weeks. Ampha was playing PZZ this week, and unfortunately another pretty hacksy match, but nevertheless, Ampha still got 6-0'd, and when you're at the top and you get 6-0'd, it warrants losing a few spots in my opinion, and that's exactly what happened here as Ampha went down 5 spots, down to number 6. And even if there was no hacks that match, I think PZZ pretty much took control of that match and never really looked back. It could have came down closer, but the hacks just made it pretty much a guaranteed win on PZZ's side.
But moving up above Ampha, we have Pierre and his Pittsburgh Pussycats, who move up just the 1 spot this week, even though he did have a really convincing win against Leonard. Hacks or not, or no hacks, Pierre really did do a good job of preserving his walls and making sure that his offense in the late game was enough to take down some of Leonard's threats. So Pierre, Pierre's been doing really, really well with that rain team, and some of the time it's not even rain. Like, I think this week he actually brought the Focus Energy Crit Kingdra set, and it wasn't even Swift Swim. So like sometimes he'll bring rain, sometimes he'll juke his opponent and think that he's gonna bring rain, but instead he brings like really offensive sets like this Focus Energy Kingdra, which ended up sweeping in the late game after he got a Focus Energy up. So Pierre doing a really good job, and I think he's going to be sticking in for the top half for the rest of the season.
Next up at number 4, we've got Raven and the Destined Lucarios. And Raven faced Rummy this week, who was at the bottom of the table, so unfortunately could not move up even though he got the win. But like I said earlier, Raven's team is just absolutely disgusting. All his mons are pretty much stalled, but some of them can actually be very good offensive threats, like that Mega Altaria who clicked DD and just did what it does best and swept at the end of that match. But Raven didn't look back at all that match. He literally just pivoted into what he needed. He had all the walls he needed to counter Rummy's team, and Mega Altaria just did what it does best at the end.
Yeah, exactly. Like you said, Raven's team, a good core, really fat core, and then having Altaria. He brought the Victini, I think, this week. No, he brought the Surfetch, which was able to break some of Rummy's team, I think. He didn't use the Surfetch too well. Like, he pretty much just clicked Brave Bird on that Mega Venusaur, make sure it got broken, and then sacked off his Surfetch. But it was really all he needed, because once that Mega Venusaur was down, Raven knew that Mega Altaria could actually just set up and start sweeping. Yeah, I will say the one thing though, Raven bringing Body Slam on Altaria, knowing that there's a Mega Venusaur on the opposite side, very good prep, because getting paralysis like that can actually really help you later on in the match. And having return over Body Slam didn't make too much of a difference anyways, because Body Slam you can get paralysis, whereas return you get extra damage output, but really if you're Dragon Dance anyways, you're not going to need that extra damage output. So Raven he won't be moving up just yet, just due to the rest of the coaches above him doing phenomenally. But we can actually move up to our number 3, who finally broke into the number 3 spot, and it's going to be Miles and his Bakersfield Bearticks moving up 2 spots. This week, Miles proved himself phenomenally, just due to the fact that he got a 6-0 on Joel. Like, Miles, he preserved everything he needed to. He made sure that nothing got broken down enough. He kept his walls healthy. And then in the late game, he just came in with toxicity and just spammed Boom Burst, and that was just a wrap. Miles, I think, finally trying to prove himself as one of the top coaches in B, and I really appreciate how Miles is starting to like glow up, because for the past couple seasons, I think he's been in B. He found his groove in B, and really good coach. I'd love to see Miles high up in the standings and the ranks.
Next up at number 2, we've got Risso and the Hell Creek Head Smash, and Riss actually pulled off a 6-0 against Crow this week, and getting a 6-0 was always fun and a good statement to make in the league. And Riss actually going up 1 spot to number 2 this week because of that win.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it is about all these 6-0s, because the top 3, they all got a 6-0 this week, and we'll show you our number 1 soon. But Riss did a phenomenal job again, and he moves up just the 1 spot at number 2. Another, a coach, Riss, who was a coach in A-League last season, so we were definitely expecting to see him get pretty high up in the ranks. But moving up to our number 1 seed in the power ranks is PZZ, who dethroned Ampa this week. He, PZZ sitting at the number 2 spot for the last 2 weeks. Only because Ampa was sitting at number 1, but now that PZZ finally dethroned Ampa, he gets to finally move up to number 1. I don't want to say too much about what happened in that match, but to be fair to PZZ and his play, because he did prep for that match, he really did have a good handle in there. And I think he was going to nab the 6-0 no matter what, if not around maybe a 5 or 4-0. I really think that PZZ knew exactly how to play that match, how to pressure Ampa's team. So he definitely deserves to be at the number 1. He's been performing incredibly well throughout the rest of the prior weeks, and he has the best record in the league right now. He's sitting at 4-0. I believe at a plus 18 differential. So that's just saying how much of a coach PZZ is. He came from C League last season, and after that, I don't think there was anyone stopping him from just going straight to the top. So congrats to PZZ for making that number 1. Hopefully he can hold it for as long as Ampa held that number 1 spot.
That is it for B-League, guys. On to A-League now. Number 16 for A-League this week is going to be Piranha Plant for the third straight week, and the Washington Walreins. And Piranha faced, I think it was Aces this week. Yeah.
Yes.
Spoilers, sadly, Aces last week, but at least he could pull off the win in that last week, so he leaves on a good note.
Mm-hmm.
But Piranha unfortunately could not beat Ace's Hail Core, and as soon as he actually had a chance at doing so, that Torn decided otherwise and literally hit 5 out of 5 Hurricanes, which is very unfortunate for Piranha, that it completely nullified his chances of even remotely bringing it back. And Aces just smooth sailed to the win.
I agree. Like, it was very unfortunate for Piranha. Like, Piranha, he brought it down really close, but of course, hitting all your Hurricanes, who does that anyways? But
it wasn't possible, but apparently it's not.
And you would think like maybe hail would decrease the accuracy of a hurricane, but it doesn't actually. Like, I think it's only decreasing sun. But if Piranha losing to our number 15 spot in Aces, it's gonna keep him at number 16 for right now, unfortunately, until he can grab a win against a really stronger coach. perhaps we can move Piranha up, but for right now, sitting at number 16, it makes the most sense. Moving up, though, we got Skyquake at number 15, and it's Lancaster Landers, who actually did have to move down a few spots just because the coaches above him, they all got some wins. Sky, he lost this week versus Stumbles, and Stumbles had a really good handle on that match. Like, he knew exactly how to pressure Sky's team, and Sky, I'm not too sure where he's going wrong with his prep, because he does have a really strong team. Like, we ranked him at number 1 throughout at the beginning of the season. He's just not exactly finding his niche when it comes to his team. It is really strong, but Stumbles just got the better of him that match.
Yeah, he literally had nothing at all for that Scarfini, which was a very good bring on Stumbles' part, but
Yes.
Scarfini literally just went through Skyquake's team as it was nothing. Next up at number 14, we've got Simi and the Blue Collar Blossoms. And Simi played beater this week, and unfortunately, in my opinion, it was still very doable at that point, but out of pure salt, Simi just sacked that Dundee, and that pretty much just sealed the loss, as Rodham was already down, and that Milotic literally just sat in the back and was smiling at it all along, and the Dragon Tail was a very nice bring, so Mew couldn't set up, and Megazard couldn't set up, so literally that Milotic just sat in the back and laughed at pretty much all of Simi's team once he let that go down.
Yeah, unfortunately. Simi's still a good coach, and like Skyquake, he's just not finding his niche this season. But hopefully he finds it soon, because we're getting to that point. It's almost crunch time, guys. At number 13, we have a coach that unfortunately had to leave us for this season. But we're still going to talk about him because he played his match this week, and it's Aces and his Tennessee Volcanians, who actually moved up 2 spots from beating Piranha. He didn't move up too much, of course, but that's only just because of how close the match ended up becoming. We already talked about that match. Aces, he preserved what he needed to, but hitting all your hurricanes, definitely very skillful. I've never really seen anyone pull that off, but it's definitely a testament. And Aces, we congratulate you for your win before you head out. We'd like to welcome Jay to the league, and of course, he's we can't exactly rank him right now because he didn't play throughout these first 4 weeks, but we're excited to have him join us from Hive.
We've got Star and the Lucky Liberos, and we can't really talk much about that match as it has not happened yet due to personal reasons on both ends.
Mm.
And just due to how the week has went and pretty much all the matches, the way it happened and whatnot, Star had to go down 2 spots in the power rankings.
Yeah, it's just us shuffling the coaches to make it more appropriate for who won and whatnot. Star doesn't move down 2 spots due to anything personal. It's just because of the fact that we have to shuffle people around. But moving above him at number 11 is Stumbles and his Cleveland Crescelias, who won against Sky this week. Very strong win. Again, that Scarfini doing work in the late game. Moved up 2 spots because Sky was already at number 12 in the previous week. So Stumbles finally climbing back up. I was anticipating Stumbles to sit pretty close to the top throughout most of the season, but this season is pretty stacked. In A-League, it's not the same as it was last season, where Stumbles pretty much just sat at the top throughout the entire season. But he's starting to climb back up, and he has a really strong team, like a really, really good team. So, expecting more from him throughout the coming weeks.
Next up at number 10, we've got Techno and the Texas Magnemites going down 4 spots this week due to a pretty big loss against Ominous Draco. And Ominous literally never looked back that match, as Golder literally went bananas on Techno. And that in my opinion, that should have been a 6-0. And Ominous just went for the very safe play and decided to have the easy win at a 5-0, but that was very, preservable in my opinion. And Techno got lucky not to get 6-0. But still getting destroyed when you're near the top is never good for PRs, and he had to go down 4 spots due to it.
Yeah, Techno just he couldn't break that goaler. It was really interesting. Like, not only that, but I found that Techno just wasn't making the reads that he normally does when he plays his matches. Like, he couldn't read the goaler coming in when he was in with the top Coco. Like, he tried to, but the top Coco itself was, I think, U-turn, Roost, Brave Bird, and Wild Charge, and none of that really touched the goaler. Like, I understand, like, Coco doesn't do much to goaler in the first place, but the rest of his team just couldn't get it. And then at the same time, the Primarina was really putting a lot of work on Techno. Like, he was pressuring Techno to the point, because Techno didn't have a switch into that Primarina. Like, he had Nihilego, which resists Moonblast, but you have to watch out for like a gigantic water type move coming from it. So maybe it was just the matchup itself. It was very hard for Techno to get around. He couldn't find his momentum, and losing 5-0 definitely has to move him down 4 spots there. So moving up to number 9 is Zombie, who did lose this week, and very similar to how it was in the previous week. Actually, the last 2 weeks, Zombie's been sitting at number 9. It's kind of hard to move him up or move him down, but he's been on a decent losing streak. He lost 1-0 to Toxic this week. Toxic, of course, was our number 1, so losing 1-0 like isn't too terrible, but he did have some really good brings with that Pessimian. Pessimian pretty much ran through Toxic's team, which was really interesting to see. Like, even when Toxic sacked the Mawile and gave the Pessimian the Defiant boost, I don't think that mattered too much. But Zombie, he almost brought the win there. It was just really close, and it's hard for us to move him down at all when he's playing against strong coaches and almost coming up with a win.
Next up at number 8, and the Winnipeg Weaviles. I mean, there's not much to talk about. The match didn't happen yet, so I'm just sitting pretty at number 8, and might go down, might go up, who knows. I'm just sitting there for this week as the match hasn't happened.
Yeah, so we're gonna have to just kind of skip over Tyler for right now at number 8. Like we said, it's not about him doing well or anything. We can't move him exactly. We can't, like, he could have moved down or could have moved up. Either way, he hasn't played his match yet. So we'll move up to number 7, and we got Cheese and his Michigan Manetrix, who did lose this week, and he does move down 4 spots. Cheese lost to Eagle this week, and Eagle was sitting at number 14 last week, and the fact that Eagle brought down Cheese, who was sitting at number 3, does have to bring Cheese down quite a bit, just because of the fact that he's the matchup itself. Like, if I remember correctly, Eagle preserved the Mega Pincer in the late game to really make sure it broke down Cheese's team. I think at the beginning of the match it was just a struggle of who could keep up rocks and who could get up rocks first, and of course, because Cheese really needed rocks for that Mega Pincer when it came in, but in the end Eagle was able to just get Mega Pincer in and clean up the game.
So next up at number 6, we've got the other half of that match in Eagle and the Ottawa Raptors. Eagle having a very great display of skill that match, and preserving his win con very well, playing very well at the end, and that Dragalgy went absolutely nuts this game.
I was going to say the same thing. He's finally landing his Dracos.
Yeah, landing his Dracos for 62% on a Corviknight. What is a resisted move? I don't know.
That's crazy.
Apparently Dragalgy doesn't know what a resisted move is either, with that massive damage, but Eagle playing very well this week, warranting those 8 spots he gained since last week's power rankings.
Okay, so moving up to our number 5, we got Zane and his St. Louis Cardinals, who lost this week against me. and he only moved down the one spot. He was at number 4 last week. Still a really good coach. I don't think moving him down any more than just the one spot, would be it's going to be insulting to Zane. But Zane, he lost to me, and it came down to a 1-0. And to be fair, I think Zane, he couldn't exactly find the right momentum that he needed to get Halucha in for like the midpoint of the match. He had to get him in at the end of the match, and that and once that happened, and it got toxic, it got worn down to the point where it just couldn't survive. Like maybe if he had Roost on that set, I know that his Halucha set I think ended up being Swords Dance, Bulk Up, Acrobatics, and Close Combat. If he had Roost, he might have been able to pull back that win in the end game. But either way, once it got toxic, it was just worn down, and he couldn't continue the pressure that he needed.
Next up at number 4, we've got Petergate and the DC Darmanitan, and Peter playing against Simi this week. Peter, definitely a good coach on a 3-game win streak. After getting 6-0 week 1, obviously, he has went absolutely bananas since then and almost claimed the spot at the top. And pretty much, like I said earlier, that Melodic was just too much for Simi to handle once both Rotom when Tandy went down, and he literally had no way at all to break it. Melodic just sat pretty in front of Simi's team and did what it does best. Just click recover, phased out all the other things, and guaranteed a few kills, and that was pretty much all that needed to be done that match. So Peter claiming 3 spots in this week's power rankings.
Yeah, Peter really showing us like a rags to riches kind of story. Like he started from the bottom and now we're here, but number 4 is still pretty close to the top. But after getting 6-0 week 1, and he can prove that he's still a really strong coach after that. I understand Beater, like it takes him, like we said before, like it takes him a little bit to kind of get into the season. So Beater at number 4 for right now, and I'm sure he's going to keep climbing. At number 3, though, above him, we got Ominous Draco and his Croatian Crawdons to move up 2 spots from his win against Techno, and it was a really powerful win. Like we talked about earlier before, like Ominous was just really able to pressure Techno, and I think it might have been more about the matchup than anything, but like it didn't even really matter. Like the Golurk just kind of sat there for a lot of the match. He predicted in some cases he didn't even really need to predict. Like Techno did have some good like strats. Like he knew how weak he was to go to ground spam. Like he had the Shuckleberry on Coco, but even then, like it didn't matter for Ominous because the Coco couldn't touch the Golurk anyways. And then the Primarina was really powerful against Techno, and he was able to utilize it properly to position it to get it to break down some of Techno's team as well. Just a really good showing on Ominous's part, and definitely shows why he's one of the stronger coaches in A-League this season.
Next up at number 2 this week, we've got Toxic and the Texas Tornadoes. Toxic, who's been dethroned this week. Yeah, Toxic this week had a very nice match to say the least, but like we said earlier, that Zombie Specimen just went bonkers on Toxic's team, and Toxic facing the number 9 spot in Zombie after being number 1 and bring it down to a 1-0, compared to Mams, who also had a 1-0, but against Zane, who was ranked at number 4. I made the decision to put Mams at number 1 because Mams is too modest to put himself there. Let's not kid ourselves, but Mams still deserves that number 1 spot, even though he doesn't like to put himself there. I just put him in there because he deserves it this week.
I just don't want the target on my back, because once you get to number 1, everyone's like, all right, Snipes.
With the way you've been playing lately, you deserve that target, and you're playing Toxic this week, so yeah. Obviously that's pretty much going to decide who's at number 1 in the PRs, and
that'll decide it.
It's going to be a battle of the giants, as we must say.
Like we said, I'm facing Toxic, and that'll really decide who gets to claim the number 1 spot. And yeah, maybe it'll come down to double forfeit. You never know. and then Ominous will jump to number one. But really happy where I'm standing right now. I think if I want to talk about the game against Zane again, I want to apologize to Zane because I kind of had a lot going on throughout the week and I didn't get to play him until later on, and I know he prepped really early. But the match itself, it was kind of odd because Zane really brought like the proper sets. Like the Latios set was toxicing everything, and even though I did have Heal Bell and Togekiss, I couldn't exactly go for it. Like I didn't get the momentum I needed to. But I made sure Kyurem broke down Like in my opinion, Zane let Jellicent going down was one of his biggest mistakes, because I was able to get up a Trick Room up, and then Melmetal just started going ham on his team. Like once the Jellicent dropped, it was kind of just a wrap. But Zane did a good job preserving the Halucha, and that kind of brought him back into the game, and yeah, and then from there it kind of just came down close to a 1-0. I just wanted to preserve the win. It didn't make a difference at that point that I was just preserving differential. But yeah, I think that's going to be it, guys. We talked about all our 4 divisions and the power rankings, and like we said before, we're getting close to mid-season, and we're getting close to finally luring in who's going to make playoffs, who's not going to make playoffs. Some of the coaches moved up, and some of the coaches actually stayed the same, as you can tell. Like there's not too many moves this time around. Some of them did, some of them didn't, but what's going to need to happen for some of the coaches at the bottom is they're going to really need to, like in their next coming matchups, they need to make sure that they start really prepping, and if they want to make playoffs or not, because it's going to be week 5 next week, and mid-season kind of determines a lot of the part who's going to make playoffs. So but yeah, that's going to be it, guys, for our week 4 power rankings. We hope you guys enjoyed, and this is us signing off.